The Omega debris field stretched before Raven Thorn like a metallic ocean frozen in time. Through the viewport of her salvage ship, the Wanderlust, she watched the endless dance of derelict vessels and abandoned stations rotating slowly in the void. 20 years of scavenging these grounds had taught her that everything out here had a story to tell, but none quite like the signal she'd picked up 3 days ago. Running another scan, Pulse, she muttered to her ship's basic AI system. The familiar blue holographic display flickered to life, casting shadows across her weather-worn face. At 45, Raven had spent more time among the dead ships than with the living, and it showed in the silver streaks that painted her dark hair and the perpetual furrow between her brows. The signal pulsed again, stronger this time. It wasn't like anything she'd encountered before. Not military, not civilian, not even the desperate beacons of ships lost to the vastness of space. This was something else entirely, a rhythm that seemed to echo the beating of her own heart. Raven guided the Wanderlust deeper into the field, past the hulking remains of what must have been a colony ship from the first expansion. Her fingers danced across the controls with practiced ease, avoiding the debris that could tear through her hull like paper. She'd seen too many rookie salvagers meet their end that way, too eager for the prize to respect the deadly ballet of the void. Proximity alert, Pulse announced, its synthetic voice carrying a hint of concern. Unknown energy signature detected. Show me, Raven commanded, and the holographic display expanded to reveal a massive structure hidden within a cluster of wreckage. It was unlike anything she'd ever seen. Not quite a ship, not quite a station. Its architecture defied human engineering principles, all curves and impossible angles that seemed to bend the very light around them. As she maneuvered closer, her sensors began picking up more detailed readings. The structure was ancient, perhaps predating humanity's first steps into space, yet it hummed with an energy that felt alive. The signal grew stronger, more insistent, like a siren's call drawing her in. Pulse, run a full spectrum analysis and prepare the boarding gear, she ordered, already moving to her equipment locker. Years of experience had taught her to trust her instincts, and right now every fiber of her being told her this was important. This wasn't just another salvage run. This was something that could change everything. She suited up methodically, checking each seal twice. Her EVA suit was old but meticulously maintained, covered in patches and modifications from 2 decades of close calls and hard-learned lessons. The magnetic grapples at her belt had saved her life more times than she could count, and the plasma cutter holstered at her thigh had carved her way out of more than a few tight spots. Analysis complete, Pulse reported as she finished her preparations. Structure appears to be composed of unknown alloys. Internal atmosphere detected, but composition is irregular. Unable to determine origin or purpose, Raven smiled grimly. Irregular is what pays the bills, old friend. She checked her oxygen levels one final time and moved to the airlock. Keep the engines hot. If anything feels wrong, you get out of here. Understood. Acknowledged, though I must point out that my programming requires me to wait for your return regardless of circumstances. Always have to have the last word, don't you? Raven chuckled, but her humor faded as the airlock cycled. The vast silence of space enveloped her, broken only by the soft hum of her suit's systems and her own measured breathing. She launched herself across the void, using short bursts from her maneuvering pack to guide her trajectory. As she drew closer to the structure, its true scale became apparent. What had seemed massive from the Wanderlust was actually colossal up close, its surface marked with patterns that seemed to shift and change as she watched. The signal led her to what appeared to be an entrance, a tear in the hull that looked less like damage and more like a deliberate opening. As she approached, lights began to flicker to life along the edges of the tear, pulsing in sequence with the signal that had drawn her here. Raven paused at the threshold, her heart pounding. In all her years of salvage work, she'd never encountered anything quite like this. The mystery before her could make her wealthy beyond imagination, or kill her in ways she couldn't even comprehend. but curiosity had always been her weakness, and the signal seemed to call to something deep within her soul. Beginning initial entry, she reported back to Pulse. Keep recording everything. With a deep breath, she activated her magnetic boots and stepped into the ancient structure. The moment her feet touched the floor, the entire chamber came alive with light, patterns racing along the walls like circuits made of starlight. The signal stopped abruptly, replaced by a deep resonant hum that she could feel in her bones. And there, floating in the center of the chamber, was something that would change not just her life, but the fate of humanity itself. Suspended in the chamber's center was a crystalline pod, its surface rippling like liquid starlight. But it wasn't the pod that made Raven's breath catch in her throat. It was what she saw inside. A figure, humanoid but clearly not human, floating in what appeared to be a state of suspended animation. "Pulse, are you getting these readings?" Raven whispered, her voice barely audible over the structure's persistent hum. The being inside the pod had silvery skin that seemed to shimmer with bioluminescent patterns, and features that were both alien and somehow hauntingly beautiful. "Affirmative. Life signs detected, though they do not match any known parameters. Caution is advised." Before Raven could respond, the pod's surface began to shift, the crystalline material flowing like water. The hum intensified, and the patterns on the walls pulsed with increasing urgency. Her suit's sensors screamed warnings as energy levels in the chamber spiked. "Raven," Pulse's voice crackled with static. "Unknown energy signature is." The transmission cut off as the pod suddenly shattered, sending fragments of crystal dancing through the zero-gravity environment. The alien figure drifted free, their eyes snapping open to reveal irises that swirled with galaxies. Raven found herself frozen, not by fear, but by an overwhelming sense of connection, as those ancient eyes fixed upon her. "You heard the song." The being spoke, their voice resonating directly in Raven's mind. After so long, someone finally heard. Raven swallowed hard, fighting to maintain her composure. "I'm Raven Thorn. I picked up your signal." "Signal?" The being's expression shifted to something like amusement. "No, Raven Thorn. You heard the song of the axiom." Few possess such sensitivity. They gestured gracefully, and their body oriented upright relative to Raven's position. "I am Solarin, last keeper of the Helix archives." The name seemed to carry weight, though Raven had never heard anything like it in all her years of salvage work. "How long have you been here?" Solarin's expression dimmed slightly. "By your temporal measurements, approximately 15,000 years. The stasis pod was meant to preserve me until someone worthy could awaken the archives." They tilted their head, studying Raven with those cosmic eyes. "The fact that you found me suggests the time has come." Warning klaxons suddenly blared through Raven's suit comm. Multiple ships detected entering the debris field. Pulse reported. Connection restored. "Military configurations. They appear to be following our trajectory." Raven cursed under her breath. She should have known she wouldn't be the only one to detect the signal. "We need to move. Now. Whatever you're preserving here isn't going to stay secret much longer." Solarin's expression hardened. The archives cannot fall into unprepared hands. The knowledge they contain. They paused, their bioluminescent patterns flickering rapidly. "Your species is young, volatile. But you, Raven Thorn, you heard the song." More alarms blared. "Ships are accelerating," Pulse warned. "Energy signatures suggest weapons systems powering up." "Look," Raven said, her voice firm despite the mounting pressure. "I don't understand half of what's happening here, but I know trouble when I see it. If you want to protect whatever knowledge you're guarding, we need to leave." Solarin moved closer, their movement ethereal in the zero gravity. "The archives cannot be moved. They are bound to this place, to the very fabric of this structure." But they reached out, their fingers stopping just short of touching Raven's helmet. "Perhaps that is not necessary. You could become their guardian, as I have been." "What exactly are you suggesting?" "A merger. A sharing of knowledge and purpose. The archives can be transferred, not as data or objects, but as understanding, a gift passed from keeper to keeper. Solarin's patterns pulsed with increasing intensity, but it must be voluntary, and it must be now. The chamber shuddered as an explosion rocked the structure. Through the tear in the hull, Raven could see military vessels taking up attack positions. Their sleek, predatory forms were a stark contrast to her weathered salvage ship. What happens if I say no? Solarin's expression was grave. Then 15,000 years of accumulated knowledge dies here, and your species loses access to truths that could help them avoid the mistakes that led to my civilization's end. Another explosion rocked the structure. Debris began floating through the chamber as the ancient hull started to break apart. Raven had spent her life salvaging the past, selling pieces of history to the highest bidder. But this was something else entirely. "Will it hurt?" she asked, a hint of her old humor creeping into her voice despite the situation. Solarin's patterns rippled in what might have been amusement, beyond description. But then again, most worthwhile things do. They extended their hand. "Choose quickly, Raventhorn. Time grows short." Raven looked at the offered hand, then at the approaching warships visible through the tear in the hull. She thought about all the years she'd spent alone in the void, searching for something more than just the next salvage score. Maybe this was it. She reached out and took Solarin's hand. The moment their fingers touched, the universe exploded behind her eyes. The universe rushed through Raven's mind like a tidal wave of light and knowledge. 15,000 years of history, science, and wisdom crashed against her consciousness. She saw the rise and fall of Solarin's civilization. The Helixians watched as they reached heights humanity could barely dream of, and then witnessed their devastating fall. But most importantly, she understood why they fell. The knowledge settled into her mind like sediment after a storm, and when Raven opened her eyes, she was changed. The patterns that had decorated Solarin's skin now flickered across her own, visible even through her EVA suit. More importantly, she understood the true nature of the archives and the weapon that had brought about the Helixians' extinction. "They're coming for the Nexus core," she said, the words feeling both foreign and familiar on her tongue. "The military. They detected its energy signature, didn't they?" Solarin's form had become translucent, their energy merging with the structure around them. "Yes, though they don't understand what they're truly seeking. The Nexus core was our greatest achievement and our ultimate downfall. The power to reshape reality itself, but at a cost too terrible to bear." Another explosion rocked the chamber. Through her new awareness, Raven could feel the ancient structure's pain as it began to break apart. "Pulse," she called out. "Status report. 5 military vessels have taken offensive positions. They're using precision weapons to cut their way to our location. Estimated time until breach: 3 minutes. Raven processed this information through both her human experience and her newly acquired knowledge. They can't be allowed to access the core. The same hunger for power that destroyed your people, I can see it in them. Then you understand why the archives had to be preserved." Solarin's voice was fading, becoming one with the energy patterns that raced through the chamber's walls. "The knowledge of our mistakes, the warning of what unlimited power truly costs. You must ensure humanity learns from our failure, not repeats it." The structure groaned as another blast hit home. Through the tear in the hull, Raven could see troops in military-grade EVA suits beginning their approach. She had minutes, at most. "The core's chamber is several levels below," she said, the knowledge surfacing from the vast repository now housed in her mind. "But it's not just a weapon, is it? The patterns, the energy, it's all connected to something larger. The fabric of reality itself," Solarin confirmed, their form now barely visible. "The core was meant to be a tool for creation, not destruction. But power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely," Raven finished. She could feel the core's pull now, a siren song far stronger than the signal that had initially drawn her here. "What do I need to do?" The choice must be yours, Keeper. Solarin's voice was barely a whisper now. The knowledge is within you. Remember, the greatest power lies not in what we can take, but in what we're willing to give up. The chamber's entrance burst inward as cutting charges detonated. Through the debris field, Raven could see the first of the military troops entering, their weapons trained on her position. "Halt and identify yourself," a voice commanded over an open channel. "This is a restricted military operation. You are in violation of." Raven didn't wait to hear the rest. With her new understanding of the structure's systems, she interfaced directly with the ancient technology. Energy patterns surged in response to her will, creating a barrier between her and the intruders. "Pulse," she called out as she began moving deeper into the structure. "Initiate Protocol Omega. Get clear of the debris field and transmit the encoded package I'm sending now." "Raven." The AI's voice carried genuine concern. "The package contains information beyond my ability to analyze. Are you certain? Trust me, old friend. Humanity needs to know what happened here, one way or another." She moved through the structure with newfound grace, her enhanced awareness guiding her through passages that had remained hidden for millennia. Behind her, she could hear the soldiers giving chase, their boots' magnetic clacking against the ancient metal as artificial gravity began to fail. The core's chamber lay ahead, its power calling to her with an intensity that threatened to overwhelm her senses. As she approached, the walls themselves seemed to pulse with energy, responding to her presence, to the archives now housed within her consciousness. She understood now why Solarin had waited so long, why finding the right person to pass the knowledge to had been so crucial. The power of the core combined with the wisdom of the archives was too much for any single being to possess safely. It had driven the Helixians to madness, to war, to extinction. But perhaps that's why she had been chosen. Not because she was special or particularly worthy, but because she had spent her life among the remnants of the past, learning from the mistakes of others. She knew the price of hubris, had seen it in every wreck she'd salvaged. As she entered the core's chamber, its swirling energies casting shadows that danced like memories across the walls, Raven made her decision. The sound of pursuing troops grew closer, but she smiled, finally understanding what Solarin had meant about the true nature of power. Sometimes the greatest victory lay not in what you could achieve with power, but in ensuring that power never fell into the wrong hands, even if that meant destroying it entirely. The Nexus core pulsed before Raven like a dying star, its swirling energies casting prismatic shadows across the ancient chamber. With her enhanced perception, she could see the quantum threads that connected it to the fabric of reality itself, beautiful, terrible, and far too powerful for any being to control safely. Last warning. The military commander's voice echoed through the chamber. "Surrender and step away from the artifact." Heavy boots thundered against metal as troops positioned themselves at every exit. Raven didn't turn around. Through the archive's knowledge, she recognized their weapons. Primitive things, but still capable of ending her life. "Do you even know what you're trying to claim?" she asked, her voice carrying the weight of 15,000 years of history. "That's classified information," the commander barked. "You've already committed multiple violations off." "It's a key," Raven interrupted, finally turning to face them. The troops took an involuntary step back as they saw the luminescent patterns flowing across her skin. "A key to power beyond your comprehension. The Helixians used it to reshape planets, create new elements, even alter the laws of physics themselves." She could see the hunger in their eyes, even through their polarized visors. The same hunger that had destroyed Solarin's people. The archives flooded her mind with images of that destruction. Entire star systems twisted into impossible shapes, reality itself screaming as it was torn apart by competing wills. "Think about what your superiors could do with that kind of power," she continued, buying time as she interfaced with the core systems. "Reshape continents, create unstoppable weapons, become gods. That's enough." The commander raised his weapon. This is your final warning. Whatever that thing did to you, we have containment protocols. A bitter laugh escaped Raven's lips. Containment. You can't contain this power. The Helixians tried. Built failsafe after failsafe. Want to know what happened? She gestured, and the chamber's walls came alive with projections. Images of the past, of civilization-ending wars fought with reality itself as a weapon. My God, someone whispered. Exactly, Raven said. That's what they thought they'd become. Gods. She took a step toward the core, and every weapon in the room tracked her movement. But power like this has a price. It doesn't just corrupt, it consumes. Changes you until you're nothing but hunger and ambition. Through her connection to the structure, she could feel Pulse executing her commands, transmitting the Archive's warnings to every corner of human space. The truth of the Helixians' fall would be known, impossible to suppress or hide. Last chance, the commander's voice wavered slightly. Step away from. The chamber shuddered as another military vessel opened fire on the structure's exterior, trying to cut their way to the core from a different angle. Raven could feel the ancient metal groaning, stress fractures spreading through systems that had endured 15 millennia of drift. You feel it, don't you? She asked the core, ignoring the troops entirely now. The same hunger in them that destroyed your creators. The same pride. The same fear. The crystalline structure pulsed in response, its energy synchronizing with the patterns that flowed across her skin. Take the shot, the commander ordered, and Raven felt the heat of multiple weapon locks on her back. But she was no longer entirely human, no longer bound by merely physical concerns. The Archives had changed her, given her access to understanding beyond normal human comprehension. In that moment of clarity, she saw all possible futures branching out before her, most of them ending in humanity's extinction. The energy weapons fired, their beams cutting through the space where she had stood a heartbeat before. But Raven was already moving. Her consciousness expanded beyond her physical form, merging with the core's systems even as she initiated its final protocol. I'm sorry, she whispered, both to the troops and to the ancient power before her. But some things are too dangerous to exist. With a thought, she activated the core's self-destruct sequence. Not the crude explosion the military might have expected, but something far more fundamental. The core began to fold in upon itself, taking the very fabric of space-time with it. Reality rippled around them as the chamber's geometry began to twist in impossible ways. The troops fired wildly now, their shots bending in midair as local physics began to break down. Pulse, Raven called out, her voice distorting as space itself warped around her. Execute final jump. Get clear of the collapse radius. Negative. The AI responded, emotion clear in its synthetic voice. Not without you. Through the Archive's knowledge, Raven could see a quantum singularity forming at the core's heart, a tear in reality that would seal this power away forever. But the cost would be high, perhaps the highest price anyone could pay. As the chamber began to collapse and the troops scrambled for escape, Raven made her final choice. She had spent her life searching through the remnants of the past, trying to understand the stories left behind in the void. Now she would become part of that story, a warning to future generations about the true price of power. She reached out to touch the core one last time, accepting her fate as reality itself began to unravel around her. The Archive's knowledge showed her that sometimes the greatest sacrifice was not in fighting to achieve something, but in letting go of power that no one should possess. Light bent and twisted as reality collapsed around the core, creating a maelstrom of energy that threatened to consume everything within reach. The military troops fled in panic, their weapons useless against the fundamental forces now being unleashed. But Raven stood her ground. Her consciousness expanded beyond normal human limits, orchestrating the controlled destruction of power too dangerous to exist. Raven, Pulse's voice cut through the chaos. Structural integrity of the entire debris field is compromising. The singularity is growing beyond predicted parameters. Through the Archive's knowledge, she could see the truth of it. The collapse was spreading faster than expected. threatening to take not just the core, but the entire sector with it. The sacrifice she'd been prepared to make wouldn't be enough. She needed to do more. "Initiate Protocol Omega Final," she commanded, her voice resonating with otherworldly harmonics. "Full power to containment systems. That will require direct neural interface with the core's collapse sequence," Pulse warned. Human consciousness was never meant to. "I'm not entirely human anymore, old friend." The patterns on her skin pulsed with increasing intensity as she stepped into the heart of the maelstrom. "And someone has to make sure this ends here." The archives within her mind showed her what needed to be done, a way to contain the collapse, to ensure the core's power could never be accessed again. But the cost would be beyond mere physical destruction. It would require the complete sacrifice of her consciousness, merged with the core's energy to create a permanent quantum lock. Through the tear in the structure's hull, she could see the military vessels retreating, finally understanding the magnitude of what they'd almost unleashed. In the distance, her faithful Wanderlust held position, refusing to abandon her despite her orders. "You were always more than just programming," she told Pulse, even as she began the final sequence. "Thank you for all these years. It has been an honor, Raven Thorn." The AI's voice carried genuine emotion. "Your story will not be forgotten." As reality buckled around her, Raven reached out with both her physical form and her expanded consciousness. The archive's knowledge flowed through her, showing her how to weave her very essence into a quantum barrier that would seal this segment of space forever. She thought of Solarin, of the terrible burden they had carried for 15,000 years, of the wisdom they had passed to her, not just of technology and power, but of the responsibility that came with knowledge, of the courage it took to give up power rather than risk its misuse. The military vessels vanished into hyperspace as the collapse reached critical mass. Only the Wanderlust remained, recording everything. Through their connection, Raven could feel Pulse's grief, but also its understanding. It would carry her message to humanity, not just a warning about the dangers of unlimited power, but a testament to the strength it takes to walk away from it. "Let go," she whispered to her faithful ship. "It's time." The Wanderlust finally engaged its engines, pulling away from the collapsing debris field. As Raven's consciousness began to merge with the quantum energies around her, she caught one last glimpse of her ship, a tiny light against the vast darkness, carrying the truth of what happened here to all who would listen. The universe bent and folded around her as she completed the containment sequence. The core's power, the archive's knowledge, and her own consciousness wove together into an unbreakable seal. In her final moments of individual awareness, she understood that this was not an ending, but a transformation. Decades later, travelers passing through this sector of space would tell stories about the quantum veil, a strange phenomenon where reality itself seemed to ripple and dance. Scientists would study it, trying to understand its nature, but its secrets would remain forever locked away. Some claimed that if you listened carefully while passing nearby, you could hear something like a song echoing through the void, a reminder that some powers were better left unexplored. And on the Wanderlust, now a museum piece in humanity's greatest spaceport, an ancient eye still told the story of Raven Thorn, the salvager who gave up godhood to save humanity from itself. The ship's log spoke of power and sacrifice, of the courage to walk away from unlimited potential, and of the wisdom sometimes found in letting go. But more importantly, they spoke of choice, of a woman who had spent her life searching through the wreckage of the past and chose to become part of it, sealing away power that no being should possess. Her sacrifice became a legend, a reminder that true strength often lies not in what we can achieve, but in what we're willing to give up for the good of others. The Archive's knowledge lived on in the warning she had spread across human space, teaching future generations about the price of hubris and the wisdom of restraint. And somewhere, in the quantum dance of the veil, Raven's consciousness continued its eternal vigil, not as a prisoner, but as a guardian, ensuring that some doors remained forever closed. In the end, she had become something greater than either human or Helixian, a bridge between past and future, a warning and a promise, a testament to the truth that the greatest power often lies in knowing when not to use it at all.